So when I first started to get into coding, one of the first things I would look up all the time on YouTube, on Reddit, would be how long does it take for you to get your first software engineering job? And I'll see people post, oh, it took me 3 months, 6 months, a year, until I finally got my software engineering job. For me, it took me a lot longer than that. It took me 2.5 years for me to get my first software engineering job. And in this video, I'm gonna break it down to you, my journey on how I got my first job. So I started coding during the pandemic in the middle of 2020, and I began it by thinking I could just teach myself. There's so many resources online. There's so many YouTube videos. There's so many blog articles. So I decided if I can do it myself, why pay for anything else? So I started watching YouTube videos. I started reading documentation on how to code. And then I quickly realized that documentation was just kind of boring. Like reading an instruction manual where I didn't really appreciate what was going on. And with YouTube videos, I just would copy the tutorials, but then after doing it, you copy the code and sometimes you get an error. And the moment that you get an error on your code while copying a tutorial, I was like stuck. I couldn't figure out what was going on and had to give it up. Or maybe it wasn't an error. Maybe there was I used like a newer version or like a different version of something, of a technology, and then I couldn't do it. And for the few YouTube tutorials that I did completely finish, I didn't really understand what was going on. I couldn't make any changes to it. I couldn't add any more features on top of it. So I felt stuck. And then also worse off, and also another thing is that there's so many conflicting advice. Oh, you should learn this programming language to get a job, like Java, Python, JavaScript. This is the easiest one for the beginner. And I couldn't just navigate around all that information. So I decided to do a coding bootcamp. So when I did a coding bootcamp, it was 3 months long, full time, and I did it all virtually. That was basically the only option during the time. I was kind of hoping that like a live in-person one will open up, but it never came about. So during this coding bootcamp, it consisted of like going to online class with a lecturer like Monday through Friday, and there was like a weekly, bi-weekly assignment or so, and then a third group projects every month. So taking this coding bootcamp forced me to code a lot more than I should have when I was doing it on my own, and it pushed me to learn faster, kind of too fast. Like I was able to do stuff, but I didn't really understand what was going on underneath. But I was also relying on a lot of my classmates' help, my teachers' help, for me to complete the coding bootcamp too. So I finished it in the 3 months and so, and then I thought I finished this already. I should be ready. I should be ready for a coding bootcamp. I finished the coding bootcamp. I should be ready for a job. So once I finished the coding bootcamp, I just started applying aggressively, full time, giving it everything I had. So at first I didn't get any results, but then eventually, with enough volume, I started getting interviews. And then I quickly learned what the coding interviews were all about. They would test you on your technical skills using a coding assessment, or they would do something like a technical interview where you have to explain coding concepts, explain projects you've done in the past to the engineer. And I got like a handful of these interviews, and I failed every single one of them. They would ask me about the projects I've done, and then they could quickly tell that I didn't really fully understand what was going on, kind of just getting by. So I wasn't getting anywhere applying for jobs. However, one day I saw that the coding bootcamp I did had a job opening for a tutor, and I thought this would be a good stepping stone for me to get into tech. So I applied for this and passed the technical interview for this and was able to get the job. And doing this tutoring job, it really pushed me to make sure I understand the coding concepts at a deeper level, because like students would ask me questions and I didn't just want to give them like the answer. I wanted them to make them think, figure out how they can solve the coding problem themselves in the future. So by tutoring students, it helped me understand coding better. And then I also came across another opportunity where I did an unpaid internship. So this was 3 months long, and one of my colleagues from the coding bootcamp actually did this internship as well. So she was able to help me get connected, and then I did that, and that helped me learn about JavaScript deeper, learn more about like creating code in production, and I had like a senior engineer that helped me as well. So once I finished that internship, I didn't start applying for jobs right away. Instead, I wanted to make sure I was an actual developer. So I created my own project using the same tech stack that I did with my internship to make sure that I knew what was going on. So finally, I did a project all by myself where I wrote every single line of code of it. So when I had a interview and they would ask me something about it, I can explain every single line as needed. So I did that, and then I started applying for jobs, studying lead code, and eventually I applied to this one apprenticeship program, something I applied to 2 times before. First time I got instant rejection, and then the second time I failed the technical screening. Now this time I was able to pass it and finally got like a 6-month paid apprenticeship program at a big tech company. And once that ended, I had to apply for this other job within the same company because they were having cuts, go through another round of interview, and then that was finally when I got my full-time software engineering job. So it was a long journey. I had to take a lot of baby steps for me to get this job. And I remember when I first began this journey, I asked a software engineer what he did to get his first job, and he told me he just kind of got lucky. And looking back at my journey, like all the self-teaching, the coding, taking a coding bootcamp, tutoring, working for free, I wouldn't call this luck for what I had to do to get my first job. And it kind of shows you that like whatever your goal is, if you don't have success early on, it could be a good thing to make sure you really want it, to make sure you really understand the fundamentals so you can deserve your goal as well. And then basically throughout this journey of I got to experience like working with a lot of different people on a lot of different projects, and it helps me today when I work as a freelance web development. So I use everything I've learned from my experience to create great products for my clients. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for other videos of what I've done in the past to shape me as a freelance web developer.